Space is a place that people of all ages, cultures, and even people with huge differences in financial status would want to visit and see. Of course, I'm not claiming that the entire world population wants to go to space or that everyone is interested in space. However, when it comes to space tourism, and when the agency organizing the trip is a powerful one, the demand for such a journey becomes quite high. But where did this idea first come from? In other words, who came up with the idea of taking people to space, showing them certain places, and then bringing them back to Earth? Well, in today's video, we will explore together how space tourism first started, where it stands today, and what might happen in the future. Before we move on to the video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like the video to help it reach more people, and leave your suggestions about what topics we should cover in the next video. I would be very happy to hear your ideas. Now, if you're ready, let's travel back in time together to the years when the idea of space tourism first emerged. First of all, before talking about space tourism, we should understand what space actually is and where the boundary of space begins. The atmosphere of our planet does not suddenly end or cut off at a certain point. Instead, it gradually becomes thinner as you move to higher altitudes. To be honest, this situation also confuses scientists because many people cannot give a definitive answer or put forward a clear idea about where space actually begins. According to NASA, space begins at an altitude of about 80 kilometers. However, according to the International Aeronautical Federation, the boundary of space starts at 100 kilometers, which is known as the Kármán line. Flights in which spacecraft reach this boundary but fail to achieve enough speed to escape Earth's gravity or enter orbit and therefore return to Earth are called suborbital space flights. If you think about it, many people who experience such a journey and get even a small outside view of Earth might consider themselves as having gone to space. However, today we know that most of the public, or most people who want to travel to space, want more than a simple airplane-like journey. They want to truly feel space and spend some time there. When this is the case, the preparation time for most agencies increases, their costs increase, and the risks they take become greater. Because of this, even though some agencies start this journey with great excitement and motivation, after a certain period they realize they cannot handle the challenges of such an operation. As a result, they cancel these kinds of tours and shift their focus to easier missions that are less risky and easier to market. In fact, we can understand smaller space companies on this matter, because if they take the risk, make promises, and actually manage to fulfill those promises, they would become the first company to successfully start space tourism and perhaps place themselves on a very high throne within the space industry. They would have neither financial problems nor a shortage of customers. So, space tourism is a great opportunity not only for large companies, but perhaps even more so for smaller companies. Anyway, the idea of space tourism actually appeared almost like a joke, and it was proposed much earlier than many people might guess. In 1964, an Austrian journalist named Gerhard Pistor applied to a travel agency in Vienna. At first, the travel agency treated the journalist's request somewhat mockingly. However, when they realized that he was serious, they forwarded his request to the relevant companies. What this man wanted from the tourism company was a trip to the moon. The journalist had applied to the travel agency for a journey to the moon. Later, the agency forwarded this request to the airline companies of the two countries that were at the center of the space race at the time, the American Pan Am and the Russian Aeroflot. The American company Pan Am did not want to miss this opportunity that had come to its doorstep. The company promised the journalist that the flight would take place in the year 2000. In fact, the idea seemed so logical to Pan Am that they did not want to limit this journey to just one journalist. For this reason, they launched a program called the First Moon Flights Club. Many people became interested in the idea of traveling to the moon that had been initiated by journalist Pistor, and the number of people joining the club grew more and more each day. In fact, according to the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, even by 1971, the number of applicants for this moon program had exceeded 93,000 people. Those who applied to the program and made reservations waited extremely excitedly for the day they would go to the moon, expecting the company to fulfill the promises it had made. In fact, many people believed that the journey would truly take place. Some were even certain of it. Unfortunately, the company never fulfilled these requests and eventually decided to cancel the program, leaving behind the promises it had made to thousands of people. Considering the time period, this was actually somewhat understandable. There were many technological limitations, and humanity was still getting used to space and even to the idea of traveling to the moon. However, many of the people who were disappointed, along with those who supported them, argued that the promised date was the 2000s. According to them, technology could have improved significantly in 30 years, and this journey could have somehow been made possible. I'm actually curious about your opinion on this as well. Do you think people were dreaming too much and creating unrealistic expectations, or do you think the company was completely at fault? Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. In the following years, various space programs were launched by NASA, and these programs allowed ordinary people who did not work at the agency to take part. Unfortunately, these programs ended with a terrible accident, the famous Challenger disaster that occurred in 1986. This mission was going to be carried out as part of the Teacher in Space program, and it included an American teacher among the crew. Sadly, the spacecraft exploded with a huge blast only 73 seconds after launch, and everyone on board lost their lives. After this tragic accident, NASA suspended suspended these programs. In fact, many people within the agency wanted these programs to start again and wanted ordinary citizens to take part in missions. However, after another unfortunate accident in 2003, the Columbia disaster, the project was completely shelved and never reopened. On the rival side, however, meaning the Russian space program, things were going a bit better. For example, in 1990, they managed to send the Japanese journalist Toyohiro Akiyama to the Mir space station, and 1 year later, they sent the British chemist Helen Sharman there as well. However, these journeys could still be considered normal space missions. The programs carried out did not really represent much in terms of tourism, to be honest, because the company did not gain any commercial revenue from them. They mainly carried out these programs simply to appear stronger and more advanced than their competitors. The real commercial space tourism flights began about 10 years later in 2001. The company Space Adventures successfully sent the American businessman Dennis Tito to the International Space Station. With this move, they essentially started a new era. However, since those years, a program that truly satisfies people and feels like taking a normal airplane trip but to space has not really been achieved. So why is space tourism such a difficult mission? In reality, the risk factor is extremely high. For example, you probably all know about the OceanGate disaster that happened recently. Of course, that mission was not going to space, but it was still a journey to a place that is just as dangerous and requires serious precautions, the deep ocean. They were traveling thousands of meters below the ocean's surface. The people who participate in such programs, those who buy tickets, so to speak, are usually wealthy individuals and high-profile figures from their countries. If a space tourism trip goes wrong, just like what happened in the OceanGate disaster, the company responsible for the journey could collapse overnight and disappear from the market, and the consequences would not stop there. Wealthy individuals who were previously very eager to go to space might start to become hesitant about such journeys. It wouldn't only be the company responsible for the accident that goes bankrupt. Other space tourism companies and space agencies would also be heavily affected and could face serious economic difficulties. Furthermore, an event like this could completely shelve space tourism once again, just like what happened in 2003. Because of this, companies do not dare to fully pursue space tourism until they can reduce the risks almost to zero. Now let's move on to the companies that are currently leading the space tourism industry. First, the company we can mention is Virgin Galactic. Virgin Galactic has attracted a lot of attention over the last 10 years with the many tests it has conducted. What makes this company different is that whether successful or not, it constantly tries to achieve many firsts in the field. It was founded in 2004 by an aviation enthusiast named Richard Branson, and it is making great efforts to carry out suborbital tourist flights as soon as possible. The goal Virgin Galactic aims to reach is above 80 kilometers, which NASA defines as the boundary of space. The vehicle that will carry passengers to the edge of space is attached to another aircraft. According to the flight plan, the spacecraft carrying the passengers will climb together with the carrier aircraft up to about 50,000 feet. After reaching that altitude, it will detach from the aircraft. Shortly afterward, it will ignite its own rocket engine and continue its journey. About 1 minute after ignition, a freefall phase will begin, during which passengers will be able to watch the Earth through the windows of the cabin. Finally, with operations such as feathering the wings and performing a flip maneuver, the spacecraft will glide through the atmosphere. Once it descends to a suitable altitude, it will reopen its wings and land on the same runway from which it originally took off. From the outside, this program appears quite logical and reasonable. Virgin Galactic is working at full speed to carry out this plan flawlessly. Another company is Blue Origin. Blue Origin was founded by Jeff Bezos in 2000, and since 2005 it has been conducting tests with various experimental vehicles. The difference between this project and Virgin Galactic is that the flight capsule is carried by a vertically launching and landing reusable rocket, and it has a passenger capacity of 6 people. On July 20th, 2021, Blue Origin successfully completed a flight, and inside the capsule were Jeff Bezos himself and his brother Mark Bezos. The 4-person crew successfully traveled to space and then returned safely to Earth. This flight was later repeated 5 more times with human crews. However, in September 2022, an unmanned flight intended only to carry cargo experienced a malfunction shortly after launch. The rocket carrying the capsule crashed to the ground and was destroyed. Fortunately, the capsule separated from the rocket thanks to the escape system and landed safely. When it comes to space, one of the first names that comes to mind is Elon Musk and his company SpaceX. On May 30th, 2020, SpaceX achieved a historic milestone by becoming the first private company to send humans to the International Space Station. With its reusable rocket boosters and Dragon capsules, the company has so far carried out 33 missions to the ISS, transporting both cargo and crew. In 2021, under the sponsorship of a businessman named Jared Isaacman, an orbital flight was carried out with a crew of 4 civilians, making it the first mission of its kind. Although the exact budget was not disclosed, it is estimated that the flight cost Isaacman a very large amount of money. In addition to orbital and ISS flights, SpaceX also plans far more ambitious journeys, such as missions to the Moon and Mars, which are more risky, more expensive, and at the same time more exciting. The spacecraft that will be used for journeys to the Moon and other planets, Starship, is still undergoing testing today. There are at least 3 or 4 more companies similar to the ones mentioned here. However, since their goals and operations are quite similar, I wanted to give examples from from the most well-known ones. In fact, in space tourism, the human factor is just as important as these companies. So what exactly is the human factor in space tourism? The process of organizing tourist space travel is not only about determining the routes to be traveled, designing spacecraft suitable for those routes, and testing those vehicles. In fact, there are many other issues that must be carefully considered, such as the precautions to be taken for the participants who are the main guests of these journeys, the training they will receive, and the criteria used to select them. For example, it is usually preferred that someone who will participate in such a flight has previous experience with airplane travel many times before, because if a person has any underlying health problem and has never boarded an aircraft before, this situation could trigger a deadly process during a space journey, not only for the participant themselves, but also for the other passengers. However, companies generally choose their participants carefully while paying attention to these factors. In addition, companies provide participants with a series of training sessions and medical support training before going to space and before the journey officially begins. Even so, during the flight, none of the participants will be responsible for operating the spacecraft or performing mission tasks. They will simply be traveling inside the vehicle. Of course, even though companies pay attention to people's health conditions, they also try to increase their customer capacity and the number of passengers their spacecraft can carry in order to earn more money. Nevertheless, none of them want to risk their reliability. Now let's imagine that you are one of the participants. You have registered for the program and it is now certain that you will travel to space. So what do you think will be waiting for the participants? First of all, the microgravity environment, meaning conditions where the effect of gravity is almost non-existent, is not an environment that humanity is used to living in yet. Most likely, this weightless environment will be the most challenging part for many passengers, both during their training on Earth and when they actually go to space. Anyway, when the effect of gravity disappears, the fluids in our bodies begin to shift and the muscle groups we predominantly use start to change. More specifically, while the muscles in our lower body lose their importance, we begin to use the muscles in our upper body much more, and they are required to perform far more tasks than usual. During the process of adapting to these changes, depending on a person's tolerance and the duration of exposure, a wide spectrum of medical problems can occur, from simple issues that do not require medical intervention to potentially life-threatening conditions. There is also a critical point to consider here. Not every flight or journey has the same profile. For example, even if two different companies both travel to the moon, the scenarios that passengers may encounter during those flights could be completely different and independent from each other. Because of this, participants must be very carefully selected and trained according to many possible scenarios. At present, some companies provide participants with training in various laboratories to prepare them for the acceleration forces and microgravity conditions they will experience during space travel. These include pool training, zero-G flights, and human centrifuge training. In conclusion, the companies stepping into the field of space tourism today are not limited to the ones I mentioned earlier. In the past, many companies such as Bigelow Aerospace, Zero2 Infinity, and Orion Span attempted to make space accessible for civilians as well. However, due to operational and economic difficulties, these companies withdrew from the market before they could fully complete their projects. Nevertheless, according to current predictions, the cost of space tourism will decrease in the coming years, and even small-scale companies may be able to enter this field. For many people, the idea of going to space may sound terrifying, but for people like me who are fascinated by space, it is actually a great blessing. To be honest, I apply to almost every opportunity that offers a chance to go to space, trying somehow to get involved in this field. Unfortunately, I haven't been successful so far, but as you can all see, space is no longer an impossible or unreachable place for us. Maybe 10 years from now, even your neighbor down the street might have gone to space. I hope you enjoyed this video. That's all from me for today. Before closing the video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like my videos, and share your thoughts in the comments. See you in our next documentary. I love you all very much. Goodbye.